everybody, it's Chelsea of the Lit Sisters, and for my video today, I thought we would do a book talk about the Tamora Pierce Circle Opens and Circle of Magic series, considering I just finished Shatterglass, which is the last book of Circle Opens. If you are unaware, the Circle of Magic series, or Circle Opens, is part of Tamora Pierce's Emelan verse. She has two main verses that she writes books for. That is the Tortal verse and the Emelan verse. Tortal verse is like Song of the Lioness, Beck Cooper, those books. I'm not really familiar with them. I haven't read a lot. I've read two. I've read the first Becca Cooper book, and I think Trickster's Choice is what the other one was called. I'm not very familiar with Tortal. I just haven't really been able to get into it. Compared to the Emelan verse, there's a lot more books in it, and I feel kind of intimidated because even when I started reading Trickster's Choice, there was a lot of references to other books because they're all all the series stand alone, but there are references to other series, and I feel like to fully enjoy them, I need to start from the beginning of the series with the Song of the Lioness quartet, which I will get to eventually. I have a lot of books to read, so at some point I think I will start reading Tortal because I like the Emelan verse a lot. But now just to talk about the Emelan verse, because that's the book I love. Right now there are about 11 books in the Emelan verse, and that is the Circle of Magic quartet, the Circle Opens quartet, and the Circle Reforged, which is an ongoing series. Right now it has 2 books and a novella. The only actual physical copies I have right now are of the 2 books from the Circle Reforged. Everything else I have is in storage because everything else, all the other books that I own, are quite old. I started reading this book series in, I want to say, the 5th or 6th grade. It was recommended to me by some friends, and I liked them when I started reading them when I was that young. I read straight through Circle of Magic, and I didn't even, this is how young I was, I just borrowed them from my school's library. If you don't know, a basic plot summary of what these books are about, they're about 4 children. Sandry, Trish, Daja, and Briar. Through various bad things that happen in their lives, and they all have pretty tragic backstories, they're brought to this Winding Circle temple in Cirlce in Emelan, where Emelan verse comes from. And it is there where then they all end up living in this same disciplined cottage, and they all learn that they have magic, hence Circle of Magic, and then adventures ensue from there. I'm gonna try and do the non-spoilerly talks first, and then I'm gonna stop and say spoilers, and then from that point on there will be spoilers in my talk. First off, things that I like just about this book series. I like the characters in this book series. It's very easy to get attached to them. I don't know, it's because without spoiling anything, they all have kind of a tragic backstory, and you find out almost, like, it's in the first chapter of the first book, all their backstories, so you find out immediately, and I think that kind of works to sort of immediately attach you to them. But even past that, when you start meeting all their teachers and all the other people in the Winding Circle community, you just really get attached to these characters. They're really well fleshed out, especially over the course of, this whole book series, because unlike Tamora Pierce's Tortal verse, which I think sometimes you follow one character and then the next series is a different character and the next series is a different character. Emelan verse, you pretty much follow the same 4 main characters throughout the entire series. They bring in some new people, and sometimes it's only on one character, but mainly it's the same characters that she introduces in the first book of the series. So there's a lot more story and a lot more development of them that you get really attached to them. So the characters are really amazing part of her work. The next part is her world building. I don't think anybody can argue that Tamora Pierce is an amazing world builder. She does a really good job of showing and not telling, in that she just kind of drops you in the middle of the world and then reveals more about it as you go on, and it just builds up this really cool world. Like, I would like to live in Emelan. It sounds great. I want to live in Summaries. Take me there. I really love her world building. It's something I've always really loved about Tamora Pierce. I think it's something she's very, very good at. The next thing I like most about these books, the way that she uses magic in them. Now, you know, there's a lot of books that have magic in them, and I don't think any of them do it quite like Tamora Pierce does. It's even way different from the Tortalverse, from the glimpses that I got of it. So basically, in this world, there are two types of magic. There is academic magic, which is much more of like, I say a spell and something happens, I can make things float in the air, and you know, it's the more flashy kind of magic. And then there is the second kind of magic, which is the kind of magic that all of the kids in discipline have, which is ambient magic, which is really an interesting, it's like you have magic linked to a very specific item, and instead of just you using magic, you use the magic that's also in the items, and like these items will also feel alive to you, like you can have conversations with them. Like Sandry is a thread mage, so she can like talk to threads, and she's like, well, silk is just real easy to command, but other threads, they're more stubborn, and like she assigns like personalities to threads. It's really interesting. Trish is a weather, earth, lightning mage. She has probably the most like showy power out of all four of them, in that she can like control the tides, and she can control rain and lightning and earthquakes. So that's all linked for her. And fire. She has abilities with fire. Daja is a smith mage. She can handle metals, like she can talk to like steel and gold and get them to do what she wants, and she can also pick up hot metal with her bare hands, which is cool. And then finally Briar is a plant mage, which means he can have like conversations with plants, which I think is also really cool. In fact, he has the added ability of being able to talk sort of like magically telepathically to his teacher through plants. Like he can like touch a vine somewhere, and it can like network through plants to where his teacher is and talk to her. I thought that was really cool. The majority of magic that is shown in these books is the ambient magic, obviously, because that is what all the main characters have, and it's just a very interesting new kind of theory on magic, where it's much more like you have to learn, like Sandry has to learn how to weave and learn how to make thread and all of that before she can really start doing cool things with her magic. And Briar has to learn how to garden, and Daja has to learn how to be a smith, and Trish has to learn all about like weather patterns and tidal waves and all of this information. And it's just really cool. It's cool. Spoilers. This part has spoilers. I'm going to talk about specifics, and it's going to be spoilery. A lot of it's from the first chapter of the first book, but you know, spoilers. Spoilers. So another thing that I feel like I should mention in this, but the reason why it's like the circle of magic, the circle opens, and the circle reforged, like really emphasizing the circle, is that due to this event that happens in the first book, Sandry weaves all of their magic together, and so each of the four kids can telepathically communicate with each other, and their magic's all mixed up, so sometimes they can like borrow magic from the other ones, and as a result they can create all these kind of really cool things. Like for example, Daja can create living metal, which is really cool. It's like the first thing she creates by accident is like this vine that like grows. It's cool. Also, that creates this interesting situation where all of the four kids can borrow strength from each other and do things that they shouldn't be able to do at that young of an age, that new to their magic, and it always is like impressing all their teachers. Let's talk about each of the characters specifically. Okay, so the first character I'm going to talk about is Sandry, because she's the first one with the book. Sandry is a noble. Her full name is Sandrylene Fa-Torin, and her uncle is the ruler of Emelan, and one of her cousins is the ruler of Namorn. So she's a very high up noble, and she can use that to her advantage. Mostly, though, she uses it when people are like talking down to her or her friends, and she's like, no. Not gonna have it. Sandrylene Fa-Torin is all about her friends. She is really, really loyal to her friends and family and people that she considers close. She is very brave and stands up for them. But basically, in the first book, when you meet her, due to the situation of how her parents died, she's been trapped in a dark room discovering her magic, not really realizing that she's doing magic, by putting light into thread to make it last. So she was just trapped in a dark room for a very, very long time, and as a result she's like really afraid of the dark. So even though she's like this really brave character, you just sometimes will see these small glimpses of where she's afraid of the dark, and it's really endearing, and you're just like, oh, Sandry. Trish is a really awesome girl character. She has this like wild red hair that goes everywhere, and she's really hot-tempered, and she really has had a really hard life because her magic is probably the showiest out of the four of them. It really makes it evident that she has magic before any of the other students, any of the other kids show magic. Like she'll go mad and wind will start blowing. One time lightning hit this tree and it was scary. And she like she senses when earthquakes are about to happen. Because of that showiness of her magic, her family kind of just sort of shipped her around because they were all kind of afraid of her and like this weird things that would happen around her. She had a really hard life. She's got a lot of walls up. She doesn't like a lot of people, and it takes a while for her to warm up to people, but once she does, she's another really loyal person. Like all these kids are real loyal. once they attach themselves to you, they're really loyal, and I love it. The next character is Daja. She is a trader, and one thing I love is that this is a fantasy series and she is a woman of color. One of the things you'll love about Emelan is that how very diverse it is. It is not all white people. It is also mainly females with a couple of males, but mainly female, and it's awesome. I love that. I love that about it. Anyway, she's something called a trader. They trade goods with all of the population in this world, but they keep to themselves as families, and a lot of people don't like them. A lot of people look down on traders, and so much so that traders carry a staff for protection. It's a mark of a trader, but it's also for protection. They're allowed to protect themselves with those staffs. And when you start her story, I mean, God, her story is some of the most heartbreaking stuff. I don't want to spoil everything for you, but if you haven't read it, but her story is real tragic. But her story really makes me cry sometimes just because I can't even imagine what she's going through. But she's a smith mage, and I love her. She's so sensible. I think it comes from her like trading family where they just trade all the time and barter and all this kind of stuff. But she's one of the more sensible of the four, and she's just her and Frostpine and their whole chemistry is awesome. I really love her character. She's like one of my favorites. And then finally, well, not last, because I love Briar. Briar Moss. He is a street kid. He's grown up on the streets in a gang. He lost his parents when he was pretty young, and he's just grown up on the street all his life, so that really informs a lot of his character. He has a lot of trouble just adjusting to living where he doesn't have to worry about food and all the feels, and he, and he also has a lot of prejudice against him by even people at Winding Circle who think he's just gonna like steal all the time because that was what his life had to be before. He introduces all the slang to the girls, and just slang that we use today that they wouldn't have used in that time period that Emelan is set in is really funny. Like, they're like, kids, what do you mean a goat? Why are we talking about goats? And they're like, no, kids means children. I really, really, really enjoy this series. I think it's one of my favorite fantasy series. It is a pretty quick read. Mainly this stems from the first four, at least, being middle school. They get a little bit older as you read, sort of, I think, a little bit like Harry Potter. Definitely, by the time you get to Will of the Empress and Battle Magic and Circle Reforged, it is definitely meant for older of an audience than you are in Circle of Magic. Those books there's a lot more adult themes that get addressed in those books. Not to say that the other books are really tame. Another thing I love about all these books is even though they're intended for kids, they tackle pretty intense subjects. They don't. She doesn't shy away from death. She doesn't shy away from how the rich treat the poor and kind of how we keep the poor poor. She really addresses a lot of really good themes in these books, which I really appreciate. And it's never like distracting, but it's definitely there. I'm going through and reading all of the series. I've now finished Circle Reforged. It was only about a month after I started it, so I've read 8 books in a month. I've read all these 8 books in a month, so it's not a hard read, but it's a good read. I'm very much enjoying it. I can't wait to start Will of the Empress and Battle Magic and get 2 book talks on those books. I think for those books I will just do a separate book talk for each. But for now, I feel like I've talked so much about this book. It was a good talk. I like talking about books that I like with people. So if you're interested, check out Circle of Magic and Circle Opens by Tamora Pierce. They're awesome. I highly recommend them. And until then, happy reading!